Hello, and welcome to episode 144 of My Circus, My Monkeys. The beginning of the year comes with challenges and excitement. And even though excitement is positive, when you're dealing with people and their emotions and their motivations, the line between excitement and challenge can get blurred. So today I want to dive into a question that was recently posed to me by a director of HR around some of these challenges. Because let's be clear, leading people can be hard. Okay, let's dig into their initial question. Lately, I'm frustrated with smart, talented coworkers who express great ideas, then pout when those ideas are not immediately implemented. Sometimes their great idea costs too much, or is shut down at a higher level, or impacts many other people or departments and would take a great amount of time and effort to implement. But it seems like every time these coworkers don't get their way, they call out sick the next day during a time that's super critical for their team. How do we collaborate with coworkers who have pretty brilliant ideas, but very little grit and even less loyalty? Signed, in desperate need of persistence. Now, I did have a few follow-up questions, so I reached out to them and they gave me some additional context and an example. We want to be as collaborative as possible in our office. We try to consistently ask for ideas to improve what we do, employee training, recognition, onboarding, etc. Sometimes an idea can't be implemented for reasons we can't share. This happens in a couple different ways, but here's one example. An employee suggested his department should participate in new employee mentoring, but his supervisor doesn't want to include his department. The supervisor prefers to onboard everybody personally. This employee continues to bring up the idea in front of others, and it feels like he has this great idea that we're just not listening to. We've already tried to gently say, "What a great idea. Have you talked to your supervisor about it?" in a way that respects the supervisor's management style and does not throw him under the bus. Okay, so I chose this question because while the HR director is really asking about how to handle these folks, there are a few layers involved that revolve around clarity, communication, and effective supervising. So, on one hand, yes, very frustrating that folks who have these great ideas seem to shut down because can't be implemented. However, we're going to address that and dive a bit deeper. So, first, I want to say kudos to this HR department for being so collaborative and being willing to give folks the opportunity to express their ideas and feedback. And you know from previous episodes, excuse me, that one of the elements of Gallup's Q12 engagement hierarchy is at work, my opinions seem to count. So, from an engagement standpoint, this is great. The more you engage your team, the more likely they are to be productive and stay at your institution. So, we already have a good start engagement wise. So, the question really becomes, how can we tighten up what happens once those suggestions are solicited? So, I'm going to use their own example about this employee who wants to participate in the employee mentoring, but the supervisor doesn't want to because they prefer to onboard everybody personally. And for the sake of clarity, I'm going to call the employee Taylor and their supervisor Alex. So, from the HR department standpoint, when Taylor suggested their department participate in this program, HR has correctly directed them back to Alex because it's Alex's choice. What I will add here is that they mentioned they did so, quote unquote, gently. And the title of this episode starts with, "Let's be clear." And the reason for that is we so often want to protect people's feelings, or in this case, be gentle in a way that respects the supervisor's management style and doesn't throw them under the bus. But often in our attempt to cushion the blow, we create confusion. So I've often mentioned this quote by Brene Brown: "Clear is kind, unclear is unkind." You need to be able to have honest conversations with your employees about, well, pretty much everything. And I'm not sure how being more direct with Taylor would be throwing their supervisor under the bus. We were going back and forth via email, so perhaps they've already done this, but you can absolutely say, Taylor, we hear you. And just to be clear, participation in this program is at the discretion of every supervisor. Alex knows about the program and thus far hasn't opted in. You seem very passionate about this, so if you want to discuss it further, you need to talk to Alex directly. There's no bus under the bus throwing. It's just clarity. And what concerns me, the question I really have, is why isn't Taylor going to Alex? And again, perhaps it's because HR was being too gentle with their suggestion. So Taylor thinks that if they just say their suggestion out loud 3 more times, like Beetlejuice, it's going to magically happen. Or more realistically, they might think that HR can make Alex participate. I mean, HR makes people do all sorts of trainings and other things on campus. So why not this, right? They may just not understand the difference between HR telling them they have to do something and being able to participate in this program. And I don't know, but perhaps the gently has muddled the message. But let's just assume that HR has indeed been clear. Why isn't Taylor just going to Alex and saying, hey, this new mentoring program HR set up sounds great. I think our team would really benefit. Can we participate? Then Alex can explain why they don't want to. Yeah, I heard about that, but honestly, I prefer onboarding everybody myself because of blank. And then they can discuss. Maybe Taylor adds, that's awesome, but I think this would just add an additional way for folks to connect across campus, etc. Ultimately, it is absolutely Alex's decision, but there is some reason they haven't had this discussion, and that is a problem. Now, I don't know why Taylor is invested in this. Maybe they have talent themes that aligned with this sort of program, and it appeals to the way they like to interact with others. Maybe they mentioned it once in public, so now it's more about winning. Or maybe they've noticed that Alex's onboarding style isn't actually that great, and they're hoping this is a way around it. Now, those are all very different motivators and would require different responses. But again, this goes back to the title that leading people is hard because as leaders, as supervisors, you do need to try to understand where folks are coming from. And until Alex talks to Taylor directly, we simply don't know. Now let's look at Alex. Why don't they want to participate in this program? And again, it's up to them. But I don't know. Maybe it's Alex's talent themes better aligned with their own approach. Maybe they think their department is unique and folks around campus aren't going to be able to really onboard them well. Maybe they've had previous issues with team members connecting with people across campus, and then they start questioning the way Alex does stuff. Or maybe they simply have control issues. Unless Alex shares this information with somebody, we don't know. And yeah, at the end of the day, Alex gets to decide. But why aren't they speaking with Taylor directly and explaining this to them? And again, this seems to have happened so much, I'm guessing that HR has told Alex all of this. So it seems very odd to me that Alex wouldn't just bring it up, especially since Taylor won't seem to let it go. And there's that additional layer from the original question. It seems like every time one of these coworkers don't get their way, they call out sick at a very inopportune time. Now, they didn't specifically mention whether or not Taylor is doing this, but let's say they have. This is again a situation where the supervisor needs to have a discussion, a clear discussion with the employee because that is disruptive to the department. And now it's become a performance management issue. And I have no idea what's driving the behavior of either party, but there are possible positive and negative motivators at play. And in this case, HR seems to be stuck in the middle. On one hand, HR is trying to get people to give their input to make culture on campus feel more inclusive, and positive. But since this is an optional program and Alex has decided not to opt in, Taylor seems to be trying to imply that HR and or Alex simply aren't listening. And this is problematic, again, because folks are not communicating clearly about what's going on. And I just want to add, I see this all the time. This has nothing to do with their HR department or their college campus. Most folks have a hard time being direct because, again, they feel like when you're direct, when you're assertive, if you will, folks might get upset. They might be perceived as the bad guy. So they want to be nice and gentle with their message. But the flip side of this often means you're not being clear. Let's pretend that Alex has been talking to Taylor directly about the suggestions and why they won't be implementing them. And even further, these absences. Alex might say something like, Taylor, I wanted to talk to you about a pattern I've noticed. You've mentioned a few times that you think our team would benefit from the new HR mentoring program. And each time I've let you know we won't be doing that. But you continue to bring it up. And each time I remind you why we're not going to, you call out sick the next day. Can you help me understand what's happening? Now, there are absolutely employees who have issues that make them more difficult to deal with. And perhaps that's what's going on with Taylor. Maybe they get their sense of worthiness by doing things like this in order to make sure that they're seen. And if that's the case, when Alex asked Taylor about this issue, they're 100% going to get defensive, make excuses, and evade the question. But even if you suspect that's the case, you still need to have the conversation. Ultimately, you need to handle it just like you would any other performance management issue. That means setting clear expectations and holding Taylor or anybody else accountable based on whether they've met those expectations. However, most employees don't have issues. They simply want to be listened to and respected. Earlier, I mentioned the Q12 question. At work, my opinion seemed to count. And that doesn't just mean, oh, I listened to their opinion. It also means that they see that at least some of the time, those suggestions and opinions make changes, makes things better. And I've seen campuses do things like give survey after survey trying to solicit these opinions, but then do nothing with them, including even letting people know what the results were. And then administrators and HR get frustrated because people stopped filling out surveys and they stopped giving their opinion. But why would they? And I certainly don't think that that's what's happening here. I'm going to assume that many suggestions people make to HR on this campus are implemented at least to some degree. And I just want to add that I'm not at all saying you have to implement everything employees suggest, because often that's not realistic. But if you never listen to or act on their opinions or get back to them to explain where their idea is, even if it's not going to work, that is 100% going to negatively impact employee engagement. And to this HR director's point, sometimes you can't implement things for one reason or several reasons. But I would argue that most of the time, you can absolutely explain why. Unless somebody's asking questions about another employee's private business or it's some sort of classified information, there's no reason why you can't explain what's going on. And in fact, discussing potential roadblocks might actually help create ways to successfully implement at least part of the idea. Often we're so stressed that when we get an idea, we think about it as just yes or no. It can work or it can't. So Instead of coming back with, sorry, this won't work, try engaging that person again and talking through the idea to see if they have any thoughts about these roadblocks. And maybe it won't work. Again, that's still legitimate. But sometimes you can make small improvements based on that original suggestion. And just seeing that there's been some sort of change or some sort of discussion can make that employee feel heard, even if the original idea can never be fully actualized. Clarity and transparency are important for building a culture of trust and vital for employee engagement. And communication is key to both. You need to be able to have honest conversations with your employees. Being annoyed that an employee isn't behaving how you would like, but never addressing it with them directly is exactly what Brene says. Unkind. So going back to the Taylor Alex example, Alex needs to be upfront with Taylor about why their team isn't going to participate. Even if it's just because I prefer to onboard folks myself. At this point, again, I feel fairly certain that HR has let Alex know this is happening repeatedly. And you may be thinking that supervisors shouldn't have to justify every decision that they make. And you know what? You are right. But if Alex hasn't already established a level of trust with their employees, Taylor's going to wonder why they're not even willing to listen. Plus, if Alex doesn't actually have a good reason for not implementing whatever this is, then that's problematic. It might be a sign that Alex has a blind spot around that particular issue, or that they may be missing other problems within their department. And when you have a baseline of trust with your people, you don't need to explain every decision. But when you're never transparent, when you never communicate, your employees simply are not going to trust you. Beyond letting Taylor know why their team isn't going to participate, Alex also needs to address it because it's becoming disruptive. So, in addition to because I prefer to onboard everybody myself, Alex needs to ask why they keep bringing it up and then calling in sick when they seemingly don't get the answer they want. Again, this is a performance management issue that needs to be addressed. It is unkind, and I will add unfair, to let them continue this behavior until it starts to negatively impact their career and reputation. Let them know what the issue is and what needs to change. And if the problem persists after that, then we're moving into disciplinary territory. But if you don't tell them up front, how do they know they're even doing anything that's either straight up wrong or annoying? And again, I'm going to go back to my original question. Why is HR seemingly the middleman here versus Taylor talking directly to Alex about this issue? So earlier we talked about potentially problematic employees, but there are also bad supervisors. And when I say bad, that's really a range of motivators and behaviors. Best case scenario, you have well-meaning people who simply don't know how to effectively supervise, or they feel so overwhelmed with the amount of work they have to do, they can't effectively supervise. Worst case scenario, you have people who have issues who've been promoted to the supervisor role, and that might manifest as them being in it for the power, or that they can't handle their authority being questioned, or that they only care about their team from the standpoint of how they make them look. Now, I want to be clear. I don't know, Alex. The HR director gave me zero information about this person other than what I've already shared. So I don't know if they're overwhelmed with everything and they just don't have the capacity to deal with Taylor right now, or they just don't believe they should ever have to explain themselves to their team. Thus, they've left this little problem of Taylor dangling for HR to deal with. But I do know there's a decent chance that Taylor hasn't talked to Alex about it because they do not feel comfortable doing so. That might very well be why they keep bringing it up to HR and other folks. Taylor's hoping someone else might be able to persuade Alex because they believe Alex isn't receptive to what they have to say. I also have no idea whether Alex's one-on-one onboarding is good or not, but I do know that their communication is not. Even if Alex is a problem employee, those issues need to be addressed. There's a good chance Alex doesn't know how to deal with Taylor, so they're avoiding doing so. And believe me, I get it. Leading and supervising people is absolutely challenging. That is why it is vital for all supervisors to have the training they need to be successful. All of this boils down to communication, and specifically clear communication. It starts with clear follow-up with Taylor about what they need to do next, and that is to talk with Alex and stop bringing it up with other people. And it includes being clear that calling out sick because they haven't received the answer they wanted is not okay. No, of course you can't make them come into work when they do call in sick, but you can be very clear on the repercussions if they continue to behave this way. When you have supervisors who do not know how to communicate, no matter how well-intentioned they are, that is a huge problem for your employees, your HR department, and your institution. Your supervisors need to be clear on what supervisors need to do to effectively lead their teams. And that includes building a culture that engages their employees. Then they need to be clear with their team members about expectations and potential repercussions if those expectations aren't met, which again, holding folks accountable. Leading people with all of their feelings and motivators, along with your feelings and motivators, can be very hard. But the clearer everyone is about their roles and the outcomes they need, the easier it becomes.